What's happening, people? Back with another reaction, back with some more punk rock, and we're back with some more Bad Religion. And this time we're going to jump ahead in time again, and we're going to go to their album The Empire Strikes First, 2004, second album after Mr. Brett had rejoined the band, and they had gone back to Epitaph. This time we're going to listen to a tune called God's Love, one of my favorites from this album. And, you know, it's funny, I think of it sort of as the back half of Let Them Eat War, because they follow each other on the album. I believe Let Them Eat War is track number 7, God's Love is track number 8. So in a way, I was almost thinking I should do them one after the other, but no, for some reason I decided this is the one that I wanted to do first. It's a very interesting song. It starts with a lot of energy. It's one of those ones that just kicks off right from the beginning musically. Lyrically, it is a bit more on the poetic end for Bad Religion. I mentioned before, a lot of their lyrics like invoke allegory, or they use sort of like visual metaphors to get across an ideological or socio-cultural point. But as far as I can tell, this one is about supernatural thinking in the way that, you know, most religionists in the world, certainly most religionists here in the States, who, you know, the majority of the country, like, percentages is Christian. I think it's something like 60 to 65%, and it depends on how you define it. Nevertheless, it's talking about how a lot of Christians in this country, and I suppose Abrahamic religionists more broadly, although that term is sort of a modern convention, which doesn't really trace historically, because historically, you know, most sects and different religions were like, yeah, and we're the ones following Abraham, you're the fucking heretics. But nevertheless, it's the way that a lot of religionists here in the States and elsewhere seem to think that the world that we see, with all of its death and suffering, not just among humans, but among other living species, you know, parasitic life forms causing excruciating pain, and, you know, the individual organisms, you know, dying of starvation or like brutal predation by some larger animal with bigger teeth and so on. So all that misery that's out there, all the suffering that we see in the human world, and warfare, and, you know, malnutrition, and, you know, incurable diseases that, you know, start at childhood and so on, just all this brutality, all that suffering, all that pain is, according to some people, a perfect world conceived in advance and unraveling following a perfect divine plan from an omnipotent, omniscient, and omnibenevolent deity. Which seems a bit absurd if that were really saying, you know, that the belief system that some of these people have, that everything is following this perfect plan and everything happens for a reason and so on. And it's like, yeah, but what about people who die from natural disasters? What about, you know, children who are born with like brutal and painful, debilitating illnesses from which they never recover? Like, there's just too many things here that don't seem to fit with this idea that, oh, the world is God's love. Like, everything we see in nature and among humanity, that's all this perfect plan. It's all God's love. And that's, you know, I believe the song is written by Greg, and there's one of the lines is like, you know, what I'm most frightened of is that they call this God's love. It's not just that, you know, the world is brutal and senseless and so on, but it's that many people seem to argue that this is a perfect and omnibenevolent state of affairs. So yeah, that's where I think the song's going lyrically. I did want to mention, I think it's near the front end, if I remember correctly, but there's a line about like viruses, you know, searching for brains, and like that people succumb to those viruses very easily. And again, I think, if I'm reading the line right, that it's more about supernatural thinking. It's the way that supernatural thinking is like a meme that gets into your brain, and then once it is in there, it can be very difficult to dislodge, or it can, you know, seep into other types or other areas of your thinking. So I think that's the virus that Greg is talking about, and sort of that mindset that comes with certain flavors of supernatural thinking and belief, which is that this is all sort of a perfect unraveling of a divine plan. So yeah, keep an eye out for that line, or an ear out, I should say. And again, let me know if you have a different take on the lyrics, or at least a different, like, specific interpretation. Always love to hear different takes, or at least, you know, an additional take beyond my own understanding. Other than that, let's get to it. This is 2004, Bad Religion, God's Love, on their album The Empire Strikes First. Striking at mental apparitions like a drunk on a vacant street. Silently beset by the hands of time, inducted in its glory. Every crack is skeleton. Viruses prowl for further victims who succumb rapidly. I think that was it. There's no justice, just a cause of a cure. It seems we all endure. And what I'm fighting of is that they call it God's law. Yeah. Twisted torment, make believe there's a truth that we all submit. Believe my eyes, my brain, my lies do all that they interpret. So tell me where's the love? I forget what the line was before my brain complies, but again, it's like this way of thinking that once it gets into your head, like you start seeing things that are very brutal as somehow being love. I feel like these kind of like stripped down, like sort of epic interludes are more common to their later material than the earlier songs. Where's the love and a careless creation when there's no above? It seems we all endure. And what I'm fighting of is that they call it God's love. One more, Greg, come on. They call it God's love. The pain is God's love. Or is it my pain is God's love? Bum, bum. Love it. Really great tune. Again, it is one of those tunes that I think it's a bit more interpretive because it's a bit more, again, metaphorical and sort of allegorical. There's something about like skeletons being weighed down by the, what is it, chronology of time or something like that. Or is it the gravity? Yeah, again, there's some lines in there that I think you could take some different ways, but I do think a general picture emerges of this sort of a brutal and senseless world with lots of suffering and death and pain, but which is then cast by some as being a perfect expression of a divine plan and love. So I really do enjoy that one. Again, I'm going to have to come back and react to Let Them Eat War, because again, they have different subject matter, the sort of flavor of the song is a little different, but for some reason I really do link those two songs, perhaps just because in the album chronology they come one after the other, although in reverse order from what we're going to have to do now. But yeah, let me know what you think. Let me know if there's another one beside that Let Them Eat War on this album that you'd like to hear reacted to, or just another punk rock reaction more generally. Always interested in taking more requests in that realm. And again, shout out to the punk rock people. Some of the first people who started making this second channel, you know, get some interaction and get some views and, you know, start to grow a little bit. So yeah, it will continue to be one of my main reaction source types here on out. I'm just really enjoying it. And again, when I did the other channel, I really didn't think anyone would care to hear me talk about punk rock. I've been talking about techno for a long time, and I had heard enough people appreciate my techno reviews by that point that, like, I was reasonably confident it was just like starting it and getting a little like, hey, yeah, this is cool. I was like, okay, right. But punk rock and like hip hop and some of these other things, I was a little more hesitant. But the fact that I have gotten some positive interaction, at least a few people who are like, you know, now commenting on a lot of videos and suggesting stuff for me to listen to or books for me to read and so on. You guys are all awesome. So shout out to the punk rock people out there. Big fan. Thank you for listening and watching. I'll see you next time. Peace.